There's an expression which grinds my gears whenever I listen to it, and I'm fairly certain to be not the only one who has the same reaction. That expression is "my truth." The reason for this is whenever someone utters that expression, they're not really referring to the truth. What they're really referring to is their perspective. The truth is reality, and a perspective is merely an interpretation made from absorbing information that may not even be truthful. At best, it's a conclusion derived from the limited knowledge acquired from the truth, and at worst, it's a downright fictitious perspective. And so, I can't shake off the feeling that there's an underlying arrogance when someone makes the expression "my truth," because even at best, it's a truthful perspective, not the truth itself. If you take a look at this channel, you'll see there are numerous videos in which I ranked monarchs from various different countries. However, these rankings are not the truth. They are merely my perspective stemming from the limited information I acquired, and even then, that information may not have been acquired properly. I may misremember things. It has happened before. At the end of the day, these videos are a piece of my own personal perspectives, not my truths. Even saying something such as Suleiman the Magnificent was the best Ottoman Sultan and that is the undeniable truth sounds downright absurd, no matter how many people would agree with that statement, because at the end of the day, it's a statement made from a personal, therefore subjective, perspective. It's an opinion, and there's no such thing as an objective opinion. Perhaps these people who say "my truth" hold the belief that there is no such thing as a fixed or absolute truth, and therefore truth merely is whatever people believe it to be. However, this point of view is just silly. The statement "there is no such thing as an absolute truth and all truth is relative" has to be false by design, because if it really is a truthful statement, then it's an absolute truth, thus contradicting its very words. To give an example, for a long time in history, it was commonly assumed, to the point people were shunned for saying otherwise, that the Earth was the center of the universe, and all objects in the cosmos rotated around it. It was a fact that the Sun orbited the Earth. Today, we know that simply isn't true. And not only do we know that the Sun orbiting around the Earth isn't true, it was never true to begin with. The question you're likely asking yourself is, why all this just to start this video? And the reason is, this video is about the fall of the Roman Empire. Specifically, when did it fall? And that really is a matter of perspective. The deposition of Romulus Augustulus is viewed as a watershed moment in the history of Europe, as it marked the end of the Western Roman Empire and the beginning of the Middle Ages. The deposition itself happened when a barbarian general under Roman employ, named Odoacer, marched towards what was by then the capital of the empire, Ravenna, and promptly exiled the then emperor, a child named Romulus. Odoacer now controlled Italy, but chose not to name a new emperor, but rather rule over Italy as a subject of the Eastern Roman Emperor. And this is supposedly where the Roman Empire ends. September 4, 476 is the traditional date marking the end of the Roman Empire. And in a way, it's an attractive date to mark the end of Rome. The city, founded by Romulus, has its last ruler bearing the same name. This empire, centered around Italy and created by Italians, had by then been reduced to Italy, and with this event, these same Italians lost their way of projecting their power, influence, and culture. Of course, if you pay attention to what I described the event was, however, you'll realize very quickly this traditional date marking the end of Rome has many problems. After all, how can this be the end of the Roman Empire when there is an Eastern Roman Emperor? How can September 4, 476 be the end when the Roman state and all its institutions continued living in the East? And given Odoacer continued ruling Italy in the name of the emperor, then technically Italy never fell in the first place. This brings one to ask himself, what is Rome? Is it a city? Is it a state? Is it its people? Is it its culture? Is it its religion? Is it its language? Is it its values? Is it the emperor? Is it the Senate? Or is it something else? Depending on which of these one prioritizes, what defines Rome can vary wildly. There are even people who believe Rome never fell, because from it, new civilizations bearing its language, culture, and ideas arose. And even if one does not subscribe to these ideas, why should Rome be limited to a matter of language? On the 29th of May of the year 1453, a 53-day siege of the city of Constantinople ended with the besieging army breaking through its massive walls and conquering the city. This event, known as the Fall of Constantinople, marks the end of the Eastern Roman Empire, or as it's also known, the Byzantine Empire. And though its Turkish conqueror, Mehmed II, would claim the title of Roman Emperor, assuming the title of Kaiseri Rum, literally Caesar of Rome, this claim was rejected by practically everyone Christian, even though the right of conquest was consistent with Byzantine imperial ideology, which believed control over Constantinople was the key legitimizing factor for an emperor. Over time, Ottoman claims to the Roman Empire faded, and the title of Kaiseri Rum was abandoned in the 18th century. And so this event, the fall of Constantinople, marks the moment the Byzantine Empire, which again, I will say, is the Eastern Roman Empire, came to an end. And this date is the one which is most used when contesting 476 as the end date. And it's not difficult to see why. After all, even though the West had fallen to barbarian rule, the Eastern Roman Empire was still alive and kicking, and nearly all barbarians occupying the lands once formerly controlled by the Western Roman Emperor still acknowledged the supremacy of the emperor. Granted, it was mostly lip service, but the justification these barbarians used to control over the Roman lands was that they were mere subordinates defending the territory under the employ of the emperor. To most people back then, the deposition of Romulus Augustulus wasn't seen as this seismic event because, to them, the Roman Empire still existed. It's just that its center of power was located in the eastern half, in Constantinople. And nearly a millennium later, this same entity, which continued almost without interruption the entire time, Latin Empire, would fall. Of course, this Roman Empire is completely different from the Roman Empire of the popular imagination. It has changed in a way that is perhaps unique in history. The dominant language of this empire was not Latin, but Greek, and this was reflected on the title of these institutions. This point is something we'll get back to later in the video. Now, empires changing languages over time is nothing new. The Neo-Assyrian Empire, for an example, gradually changed its dominant language from Akkadian to Aramaic, though Akkadian remained a spoken language to the political elite. Regardless, Aramaic became an official language alongside Akkadian. However, even in this case, the matter of the Byzantine Empire is a little different. It was neither a case of language evolving over time into something else, nor demographic changes in the area controlled that changed the official language of the Roman Empire from Latin to Greek. It was the simple case that, even before the division between East and West, the dominant language in the West was Latin, whereas the dominant language in the East was Greek. There might be another reason why the Byzantine Empire may not be regarded as the Roman Empire, and that is because for much of the medieval ages there was in the West a Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire. This empire, created on Christmas Day at the year 800, with the Pope Leo III crowning Charlemagne as Roman Emperor, and in the West at least, this was regarded as the Roman Empire, with the Byzantine Empire being called the Empire of the Greeks or the Greek Empire, even though that's not what the Byzantines called themselves. Mind you, they didn't call themselves Byzantines either. The name was barely used at all until French writers such as Philippe Labbe and Du Cange published their works on the Byzantines. and as such, referring to the Eastern Roman Empire as Byzantine has stuck to this day. What the Byzantines actually referred to themselves as was Romans. But back to the issue of the Holy Roman Empire and its creation. At the time, the Pope crowning an emperor was something that had never happened. The only indication we know of that the papacy had the power to name an emperor was a decree called the Donation of Constantine, in which Emperor Constantine transferred religious and imperial authority to the Pope. However, this decree is a forgery. Emperor Constantine ruled in the 4th century, while the text itself was likely written in the 8th or 9th century. Though again, this isn't a justification behind the coronation of Charlemagne. There's more to just this, in regards to the creation of the Holy Roman Empire. Byzantine power had been waning, especially in the West. The iconoclast heresy had erupted to the point there were Byzantine emperors who were iconoclasts, and the coronation of a woman, Empress Irene, to the Byzantine throne was seen as unacceptable to the Latin Church, which defended only a male Roman emperor could be the head of Christendom. Charlemagne was a man, had forged a large empire in the West, and both he and his father Pepin the Short had defended the church against the Lombards, and as such, he was seen as the ideal candidate for the papacy. The Holy Roman Empire was regarded as the Roman Empire for much of its duration, though nowadays it's seen more through the eyes of Voltaire's old adage that the Holy Roman Empire was not holy, not Roman, and not an empire. It was not holy because at the time of Voltaire, it was certainly not unified by religion. Much of the north was Protestant in a supposedly Catholic entity. It was not Roman as its geopolitical center was Germany. And it was not an empire because in practice it was a collection of semi-independent princedoms who often challenged the authority of the emperor himself who, in rather unusual fashion, had to be elected. Also, for the sake of brevity, I shall not explore scenarios that hinge on the idea of the Holy Roman Empire being in any way, shape or form to be the Roman Empire, though I will note that this view still has its support. What's important here is that the Holy Roman Empire's existence was a factor for much of the West, for a very long time at least, not seeing the Byzantine Empire as the Roman Empire. There's a clear divide through much of the medieval ages between East and West. But how did this division come to be? On the 17th of January of the year 395, the Emperor Theodosius died. He was the last ruler of a united Roman Empire as, with his death, Rome was to be divided by his two sons, Honorius and Arcadius, with the younger son Honorius getting the west and the older son Arcadius getting the east. This division could also be interpreted as the end of the Roman Empire. However, the Roman Empire having more than one emperor and its territory divided is not new. Co-emperors in Rome may have started when Nerva made Trajan his successor and in fact emperor in all but name, and definitely when Antoninus Pius died and left the empire to his two adopted sons, Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus. Diocletian famously split the empire into four, with four co-emperors each ruling their own territory. And when Valentinian I became emperor, he quickly divided the empire between East and West along with his brother Valens. In fact, by the time Theodosius died, the idea of having the empire divided between East and West was increasingly common. Theodosius himself was the last ruler of a united Roman Empire, but his rule of both East and West only lasted about 4 months. And before him, the last ruler of a united Roman Empire was the previously mentioned Valentinian, who only ruled over the full Roman Empire for little over a month before splitting it. The emperor before him was Jovian, who ruled for about 6 months, and before him was Julian, who ruled over the entire Roman Empire for about a year and a half. For a lengthier rule over the entire Roman Empire, one would need to go back all the way to Constantine himself, whose sole rule lasted over 11 years. It was Constantine that established Constantinople as the new Roman capital. This city would become the new center of power of the Roman world, and it was perhaps this change from Rome to Constantinople that would make the empire lose its Romanness, if you will. And it's this idea of losing its Romanness that I want to explore for the next few dates that could be proposed as the moment the Roman Empire died. Flavius Petrus Sabatius was originally a Roman peasant born in Dardania, and eventually came to be known as Emperor Justinian. His death on the 14th of November of the year 565 is regarded by some to be the end of the Roman Empire, and there are several reasons behind it. Justinian was a native Latin speaker, as he refers to it being his native tongue in several of his laws. And in the eyes of many, he is the last Roman emperor to act like a Roman emperor. Specifically, one needs to look at what his reign is most famous for: the military campaigns enacted as an effort to regain the West. Justinian successfully reconquered both the province of North Africa, which had been lost to the Vandals even before the fall of the West, reconquered Italy, which had been under the control of the Ostrogoths, and conquered the coast of Spain in what would be called the province of Spania. Dalmatia was also recovered. There is more to Justinian than just the conquests undertaken during his reign, of course, and perhaps that would add further incentive to mark his reign as the end of the Roman Empire. From his ambitious building projects to his legal reforms, Justinian's reign is immense. So immense it deserves a video all for itself, but let's not get sidetracked. It is perhaps this lack of ambition shown by his successors why some mark his reign as the end. Furthermore, there are no Latin-speaking emperors that we know of after Justinian. He may very well be the last emperor whose native tongue is Latin, and thus the loss of Romanness in the empire is finalized with him. At least, that's the point of view. This loss of Romanness will be explored further. I have often found it very curious that, out of all years suggested for the end of the Roman Empire, there isn't anyone I've seen suggesting this year, especially when we consider the supposed loss of Romanness signifying the end of the Roman Empire. Though I may not necessarily subscribe to the notion that the Roman Empire ends here, if one is to consider that Latin is essential in order for an empire to be the Roman Empire, then this year may be perfect. For 610 marks the year in which Emperor Heraclius rose to the imperial throne. As I have previously said before, the dominant language of the Eastern Roman Empire was Greek, but up until Heraclius the official language of administration was still Latin. Heraclius changed it to Greek as barely anyone in the empire spoke Latin at that point, and so it was with him that the Augustus became the Vasilevs. It was also believed for very long that it was him who created the theme system, but modern scholarship now points more to the reign of Constans II. Under Heraclius, the territory of the empire had also changed, from the more or less traditional territory belonging to the eastern half of the Roman Empire to the Byzantine state from the Middle Ages we are familiar with. In other words, it can be interpreted that Heraclius' reign marks the moment in which the Eastern Roman Empire became the Byzantine Empire. But if one considers that culture is not what defines the Roman Empire, then let's head back to the state, and specifically, how long it goes uninterrupted. The Fourth Crusade can easily be described as an absolute mess. What was supposed to be an expedition to Jerusalem was entirely sidetracked, and the Crusaders ended up causing more trouble to Christians than to Muslims. First, an agreement with Venice led to the Crusaders attacking the very much Christian city of Zara, which led to them all being excommunicated by the Pope before being called to Constantinople over dynastic intrigues. The reason the Crusaders became involved with these intrigues in the first place was money. Specifically, the promise of money. With that promise not being kept, eventually the Crusaders decided to sack the city, and then proclaimed the newly formed Latin Empire, with the sacked Constantinople being its capital. What parts of the Byzantine Empire that did not fall under the control of the Crusaders fractured into three separate political entities: the Empire of Nicaea, the Empire of Trebizond, and the Despotate of Epirus. Up until this point, the state that is known as the Byzantine Empire had been running consecutively ever since the death of Theodosius and the permanent division between the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. As mentioned previously, this state had undergone many transformations. Naturally, a Roman from the 2nd century would find this Roman Empire to be utterly unrecognizable. But the state itself, which first arose from origins so ancient the only answer we have for them is mythological, had existed up until this point. The Byzantine Empire would not be reformed until 1261, when the Nicaean Empire took Constantinople, and it would eventually fall under the hands of the Ottoman Turks in 1453, as mentioned before. But potential years for the end of the Roman Empire do not stop here. In fact, I'm not sure if they ever stop. There are so many potential years marking the end of the Roman Empire that it is, quite frankly, exhausting to anyone looking for closure. And I say this earnestly. Without going in too deeply on each of them, because otherwise I would never finish this video, here's a list of potential years and events that could serve as the end of Rome according to many different points of view. 1284 for the ascension of Diocletian and the end of the Principate, 324 with the sole rule of Constantine, 480 for the death of the last living Western Roman Emperor Julius Nepos, 486 for the end of the last Roman domain in the West, the Kingdom of Soissons, 1479 with the end of the last Byzantine remainder, the Despotate of Epirus, the abdication of Charles V in 1556, 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia, 1797 when Napoleon conquered Venice, 1806 with the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire, the end of the Ottoman Empire in 1922, and many more I am most likely forgetting. Of course, many of these events may lead to some to interpret the fall of Rome as not a single event in history but a gradual process. And there are people who believe the Roman Empire never ended, either because it lives on in many cultures, laws, and ideas used in the world, or because they see certain countries as the continuation of the Roman Empire, as seen, for an example, in the idea of Moscow being a third Rome after the original Rome and Constantinople, an idea that goes as far back as the 15th century. Likewise, fascist Italy saw itself as a third Rome, and there are far more. The rabbit hole of the end of the Roman Empire does not seem to have an end itself. If you were to ask me, is the truth real? The answer I'd give you is yes. The truth is reality itself. But if you were to ask me, is it possible to fully grasp the truth? Then my answer is no. Human limitations and imperfections prevent us from ever doing so. The best we can do is getting closer and closer and closer. The question of when did the Roman Empire fall is something I have pondered over many times, and yet I can't reach a definite conclusion. If you are to ask me the question, is there, objectively, an end to the Roman Empire? The most honest answer I can give you is, I don't know. Much like the truth itself, identifying the objective end of the Roman Empire eludes me. The best I can hope for with this video is that I have informed you, the viewer, in the most objective and unbiased manner I could have done. Perhaps after watching this video you may have changed your mind, or perhaps you didn't. Regardless, if like me, you aren't sure of a determined date for the end of Rome, then hopefully I helped you make up your mind. Not by guiding you directly to the answer, but giving you the knowledge you needed in order for you to make that conclusion yourself. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, leave a like. Of course, if you have your opinions, by all means share them in the comment section below. I know this topic has plenty of differing opinions. And if you aren't subscribed, then please do. I'd really appreciate it. There's a link to my Patreon in the description if you wish to support me there. This was Spectrum, and I'll see you around.